Welcome to Adjusted Reality, a podcast series trusted by the adjusted and brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, where we learn from athletes, celebrities, influencers, and healthcare professionals about how to optimize health in a fun, relatable way. Join me, Dr. Sherry McAllister, as I speak with author, innovator, and counselor Michelle Mays about how disruption in our personal relationships impacts every area of our life, including our health. Michelle Mays is a licensed professional counselor and a supervisor in both Virginia and Washington, D.C., and a certified sex addiction therapist and supervisor. She was trained by Pia Melody in the post-induction therapy model for treating developmental trauma and is currently completing her PhD in clinical sexology and certification in emotionally focused therapy for couples. She is a member of the Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health, the International Institute for Trauma and Addiction Professionals, the International Center for Excellence in Emotionally Focused Therapy, the American Counseling Association, and the North Virginia Licensed Professional Counsels Association. Today, we have a distinct pleasure to have the author of the newly released book, The Betrayal Bind, How to Heal When the Person You Love that hurts you the worst. And this is really a key area for us to develop in our healthy and prosperous lives. So welcome to Adjusted Reality, Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks for having me be here today.
It is wonderful, and your book is fantastic, and there's a lot in it. So we're going to try to unpack it and kind of go through in a general way, a lot of which may get technical, and hopefully you can bring it to an easy way to understand and start to build building blocks of success for us. But one of the pieces in the book is there's a lot of hurt that goes in a relationship. And the title of your book says it just beautifully. And it's really about when the person you love the most hurts you the worst, because you always expect that the person who loves you the most always has your best interest in mind. Let's start with what compelled you to write the book?
Well, so I've been in the field for over 20 years of counseling and mental health, and I've worked during that time largely with couples and relationship issues and trauma issues, particularly around sexual betrayal. And so I have my own story of sexual betrayal that I dealt with many, many years ago, and that's kind of what led me into the work initially. And then since then, I have just been learning from my clients and fascinated by how this impacts us, how it impacts our whole world, every part of our world, and how we can bring better and better models of healing to help people with it. So that's what I'm focused on doing in my professional world.
Beautiful. You know, it is painful to have your own experience, but I also think that it can prepare you for some of the most difficult times that come when you've been where someone has been, and sympathy and empathy come together. And it's quite beautiful that you can share your experience and be vulnerable to so many, coming on a podcast and being able to say, you know, there are unfortunate circumstances that come in people's lives. One of them is the betrayal. So let's start with the very negative, which you are betrayed. There's a disruption in your personal relationship. Over the years that you have been doing this, how do you see that disruption that has been caused when you're hurt the most in the deepest part of your heart affecting people's mental and emotional well-being?
I think that when we're talking about what I work with typically is sexual betrayal, so some form of cheating or infidelity. And, I think at this point that I like to say everybody knows someone who's been cheated on, right?
Right.
because it is kind of ubiquitous, and that ubiquity can make us miss how profound it is for people. And when we experience a rupture in safety and a rupture in our sense of, I can trust you, you've got my back, we are a team doing life together. When that gets damaged, it affects every single part of our world. So it affects our physical health, it affects our mental functioning, it affects our emotional well-being. It is experienced by the body as a trauma. And as such, it sends the body into deep, deep distress. And then that spills out and affects every area of life for those who are dealing with betrayal.
There was a piece as I was reading through the book that stopped me, and it's the vulnerability aspect. And it's so difficult to be vulnerable. And it starts when you're young and someone hurts your feelings. And then you kind of toughen up. You figure out the ways to which you can navigate the world without allowing someone to hurt you that badly again, right? And as you get into your mature world of relationships, and especially if it's a marital relationship, you tend to start to let down those barriers that have been created over the multiple years. Can you kind of work with me on when you get into these vulnerable places? It can disrupt a lot of your life. And how do you, from going deep into it, and what do you see when the person comes in often when they have had these extremely emotionally charged betrayals? What do you see first? Like, what can someone recognize in themselves that they're suffering? Not that they don't know they're suffering, but some of the things that are not obvious to people that have had this happen to them.
So I think when you experience betrayal, let me talk about the vulnerability piece first. I think, I'm thinking about all so many betrayed partners that I've worked with who have said to me, when I met my partner, my life partner, or the person I've been in a relationship with, I thought I had found my home, and I felt safe with them in a way I've not ever felt safe with somebody else. And I think when we find our person in the world, it often feels like that to us. It feels like we found home. And it often, many of us have an experience of kind of this like letdown where I can now be myself. I can be authentic. I can show up here. I can be vulnerable. And this person has me, right? They've got me, and it's safe here to be my most vulnerable self and kind of show my tender underbelly in the relationship, right? And betrayal, when you have that experience of this is my place and my person, betrayal comes in and just wipes that away. And often I think what happens for people is they actually feel like, oh, why did I let myself be that vulnerable? They can almost feel shame about it, about letting themselves feel vulnerable. And of course, all their protective coping strategies are going to rush to the front, and they're going to want to protect themselves by not being vulnerable for a period. And they're going to have to work on that in their healing. Part of the healing process is building your resourcefulness to risk again with vulnerability after being hurt in this kind of way. So I think vulnerability is what gets hurt in betrayal. It is what gets harmed in betrayal. It is kind of the core of it, in my opinion. Remind me what the second part of your question was, because I've lost it.
The second part is, sometimes even though you have had this unfortunate experience and you think you're getting through it, there's things that you carry unless you work it through, which is why we have this beautiful podcast today with you as the expert. If you don't work it through, there's things that you're going to carry into your future that are not going to serve you well.
Yeah, I think of betrayal the same way I think of any big crisis event. right? I think when crisis events like a diagnosis happens to us, or an accident, or we lose our job, or we have a financial thing, or, all the things that can happen in our lives that are very painful and very challenging. I think betrayal is just like those, in the sense that the the thing that makes the difference is not that the circumstances happened to you, but it's how you go through it. It's
Well
how
said.
you approach it. And I think sometimes we think it's our circumstances that are determining our fate. But I think actually our fate is very much determined by our perspective on the circumstance, and then how we journey through it. And so for those who've experienced betrayal, that's true too. And if you do the healing work and you're willing and able to see betrayal as something that is now a part of your life to grow you as a person and grow you into more of who you are authentically here to be, then you're going to be able to heal in a different way than someone who is looking at betrayal as something that has happened to them that they are a victim of and that they are stuck in and can't overcome. So how you approach it is huge in the outcome that you get.
It is one of those moments where, although it's extraordinarily painful,
Mm-hmm.
reflecting on how you move through it is going to define the person that you become. I like those words, Michelle, and I think they're true to cause in so many ways in the things that we do in our life. And there are healthy coping strategies that support us, and then there's the negative ones that actually tear us down. And one of the things I think back as I reflect on some of the traumatic things that have happened in my life is I didn't want the experience to change the way I trusted someone in the future. And that was a hard one, because unfortunately for me, having run my own business and found the person that was closest to my business
Mm-hmm.
was stealing from me, it became that moment and impacting me stressful, but hurting my heart, because this was the person that I truly believed was watching out for the business on a holistic, trustworthy, authentic self. And then I find out that unfortunately that was all not true. And when I had to work through the police reports, the one thing that really stood out for me was the comment, "Don't let this change the way you think of people."
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of sat back and thought, that's true, because I want to see the best in people. The experience is the experience, but not everybody's a thief. And Michelle, can you kind of walk us through the healthy coping strategies and maybe some red flags that don't necessarily stand out, that kind of show that you're not completely healed yet and you do need
Mm-hmm.
some assistance in that?
Mm-hmm. So I would say, healthy coping when you're dealing with betrayal, I think the starting point is letting yourself have all the feelings about it, because you're going to have a lot of them and they're going to be very changeable, which means one minute you might be very, very angry, and the next minute you might be enormously sad, and the next minute you might be confused and in disbelief that this could happen to you. And then you'll swing back into anger or revenge fantasies, all of that kind of thing. And I think because betrayal is so painful, we often want to escape the feelings. We often want to, we can use all kinds of things to medicate, right? We can use shopping, we can use alcohol, we can use eating, we can use all the things, TV, gaming, all the things, social media, to basically not be in our own experience. And so I think the first thing is that you have to really honor the fact that this is going to take a while to sort through all these feelings, because each feeling, our body can only feel one feeling at a time. They can rapidly switch, but only one can be felt at a time. And we have to take the time and space to feel all the different things and be with those emotions, because those emotions are messengers and they're giving us information. about what has happened, what it means for us, what it's going to mean for us in the future, all of those things. So the first thing I would say is to be with your experience. The second thing I would say is to surround yourself with other stable relationships. Because betrayal is relational, right? It's always between you and other people in some way. For you, it was a work thing. For other people, it's in a romantic partnership. Because it's relational, it does, like you said, it hits that part of you that can feel like, I can't trust others. What if everybody else is like this too? What if everybody else, I thought this person was trustworthy. I can't even trust myself to know, right? So I think one of the things that helps to combat that is to put other people around yourself who you do trust and who are stable and supportive and who know how to come to your rescue when you're in distress, who know how to be available for you. Like they're the people who will pick up the call when you call them, right? They'll pick up the phone. They're the people who will hold your confidence. They're not going to blab it around, right? They're also the people who will give you the time to sort through your own experience. So one of the things that happens in betrayal is that your relationship with that person, the trust gets destroyed. And so that your sense of security, especially if this is your romantic relationship, your sense of safe base and secure base in the world gets rocked. And so I often talk about needing to shore up your sense of security in the world while this relationship is wobbly, or maybe while you're leaving the relationship, with other relationships, other friendships, mentors, therapists, professional helpers, healers, chiropractors, everybody who can help your body process what's happened, help your mind process what's happened, and can support you. So I think having that kind of relational connection would be another thing that I think is super, super important.
I like that, Michelle, because it brings back the recognition that it's kind of a 360 view. You have to take a full visionary look at how are you doing? Take note. And if it's a safety factor, who is safe in your life? If it's a bodily factor, that it's turned into, I get migraine headaches, I feel it in my heart, I have heartburn. I mean, you recognize that these types of traumatic parts become a whole body experience, and how to deal with them is so incredibly important. And kind of, I like where you have taken that kind of safe base, and that we noted that there's shame, right? There's the piece of it that you feel ashamed of yourself for letting this person into your life. So share more about those abilities to get that healthy coping strategy back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, can I also piggyback for a minute just on that piece you said about affecting the whole body?
Right.
Because as I've worked with betrayed partners over the years and people dealing with betrayal, the array of health issues that people come in with is amazing to me. From digestive issues to migraines to limbs twitching all day long for no reason, to developing autoimmune issues, to cancer, it just runs this enormous gamut. And what is really clear to me, and I think other professionals working in this arena, is that betrayal is a bodily based experience, and that the trauma is held in the body and it impacts your health and well-being at a bodily based level. That is really, really profound. And so I think when I think about treatment for betrayal, I think having somebody like myself who understands it psychologically and emotionally and can really help on that. But also, you need a team of people helping support your body. You need people who understand how trauma can impact your muscles and your organs and your autoimmune system and all those different things to help support you with that too. So I would say, kind of coming back to healthy coping and helpful coping, is to really think about who can support my body while I go through this trauma, because I'm not going through it in my head. My body is going through this trauma.
Oh, that is a exceptionally important aspect. Is it is an entire body experience. And I remember a quote that was like 97% of dis-ease is caused by the fact that we're not dealing with the things that are coming through. That is actually less than 3% of the things that cause disease are actually functional and non-controllable. And it kind of made me think about how relationships impact our world, and yours specifically, and how well you wrote the book on helping people really understand these key concepts.
Yeah, it is. I think, like you said, we don't realize how much of our emotional world is impacting our physical health. And I think the longer I'm in the field, the more I understand that. I think when I was a baby therapist, I didn't understand it at all, and I just keep growing in my respect for the way our emotional world is manifested in our physical world and manifested in our physical health, and the interplay and the feedback loop between those two is hugely important. And I think we underestimate it tremendously.
It's an interesting thing because it brings me back to in practice where you're working, and chiropractors across the nation have had these experiences where they're working on the musculoskeletal system, and the patient starts to cry and the doctor pulls their hands away and they're trying to figure out, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah.
And it was the emotional release of where that pain was centered. And it sounds, for those of you that are not healthcare providers and a patient, sometimes when someone hits just the right spot, if you're getting a massage, and all of a sudden you feel this like just a full body release, like I was carrying all that tension in my shoulders and you didn't even recognize it. Some of the pain, literally, as you work through it, and there's instrument assisted programs that work through old scar tissue. Well, that's old scar tissue that was built through emotional experiences too. And they come with all the baggage that moves us forward, which is why the more we work to heal, and that, Michelle, is why your book is so important, is we have to be able to work on the healing mechanisms of some of the things that we need to understand, that anger and shame and trying to take your power back.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can kind of look through the lens from what you've seen over the many years on people trying to support their own healing, and they may not reflect on some of the things that they carry with them moving forward.
Yeah, I think, what comes up for me as you're saying that is, I think too, thinking about taking your power back, in the process of healing. And I think powerlessness is one of the most dangerous emotions that humans can feel. And if you think about, powerlessness has started wars, prolonged feelings of powerlessness start revolutions. I mean, we don't do well with feeling powerless in our lives, personally, professionally, politically, right? And so I think betrayal, or anything that life serves up to you that's like a big crisis, often makes us feel powerless because we didn't choose it. Right. We didn't volunteer for it, right? We don't want it. It's usually something we don't want. We don't want to have to be dealing with, and it has come to us for whatever reason. And that can make us feel incredibly powerless, and we can get stuck in that powerlessness. And when you're stuck in powerlessness, it is going to affect your health. It is going to affect your body. It's going to affect your posture, your breathing, how you carry yourself in the world, how you think, your beliefs about everything. All of it is together, right? All of it is part of one big whole. It's going to affect everything. And so to me, kind of the centerpiece of healing for betrayal, but really around any kind of crisis that's coming in, is to really remind yourself that where your power lies is in your ability to make choices for yourself. Your power is not in your circumstances, because you can't always change them. You can influence them, you can affect them, but you can't make betrayal not have happened if it happened to you, right? But you do have choices about, okay, this has happened. How am I going to think about it? What am I going to believe about it? What am I going to believe about me? What am I going to believe about the person who betrayed me? What am I going to believe about my ability to create change for myself? How am I going to think about my ability to move through this and come out the other side and be even stronger and better and have grown as a person? And then how am I going to make choices about how to care for myself? Am I going to make choices about who I put around me, who I put on my team? Right? I always think when you're dealing with a crisis, you need a team.
Yes.
You're right. You need all your friends, you need your family, you need your healing professionals, you need a team. So who am I putting on my team? And then how am I interacting with them to move myself toward healing? And every single choice you make brings your power back to you and puts you in a place where you're now empowered and making choices and taking charge of what's happening to you in ways that you can affect change.
Well, I look at that word and empower, and it brings me to a place where you have to have faith too. Because, when faith is not there that you're going to get through this, that hopelessness brings all pieces down. And one of my good friends had said, hope and faith are the first to enter a room and hopefully the last to leave. And that was very touching because it brings me back to that team that you were talking about. Is they also can encourage you and inspire you and bring passion back into your life. And also when you start recognizing that you do have the choice on how you think about this, that it's not inevitable that you're stuck in this hole forever. You have to be building that ladder out of this hole and getting to that space where you can breathe again, where you can trust again. And power then, as I see it, starts allowing you to set those boundaries, because let's face it, you didn't choose it, it happened to you, but now you get to choose how you respond. And oftentimes I've seen, especially with some of the patients that I've treated, is they start to accept that it happened and there's a forgiveness, but the boundaries are not there. And it may be a insecurity issue. It may be a self-confidence issue. Can you expand on how a person who is now getting their power back, who has a good team, doesn't allow themselves to kind of be taken advantage of by this person that did break their heart and tries to come back into their life?
Yes, I think too, can I go back to your faith and hope
Yes,
piece
please.
as well? So one of the things that I talk about is authentic hope, right? So the difference between false hope and authentic hope. So authentic hope is based in reality. It is, I'm going to deal with the reality of my situation and I'm not going to move out of reality, right? I'm going to stay in that awareness of what's good for me, what's not good for me, what's possible with this person who has harmed me, or what's not possible with this person who has harmed me. And I think then that gets to boundaries, because we can only set good boundaries if we are in awareness of our reality. And if we are grounded in, this is where we're at in the repair process. We're not here, we're here. So these are the boundaries that are needed for right now. And maybe later we'll be able to expand them out as trust grows. Or I'm not able to be in a relationship with this person, so I actually need some stronger boundaries, because this is the reality of who this person is. And I need to stay in that reality as I set boundaries here. So I really connect boundaries with staying in reality. And then I connect reality, that's part of authentic hope, is knowing what your reality is and then feeling capable of making good choices to deal with it.
I really like what you said because it brought me put a smile on my face. For those that you're listening, for those that you are watching it, you'll know is she said the reality, the authentic reality, and setting the boundaries. One piece of it is sometimes you need to adjust your reality, and you will be able to explore new areas if trust returns, and trust returns very at your pace too. You can't be forced by someone making you feel guilty because you no longer trust them. I think that authentic ability to recognize your feelings, as you said at the very beginning, recognize that you can switch from on and off, and sometimes you begin to feel the revenge. There's all sorts of feelings as I was working through your book on from revenge to anger to the sadness and the disappointment in yourself, because there's times where you start to reflect in your inner sanctum of, what did I do wrong? How is it my fault? Did I do this? And I'm sure that's a very difficult place to start pulling through. And that's probably, as you say, Michelle, that's why you need your power team around you to say, oh no, hold on a second. We're supporting you. We're listening to you, and we're creating an open space that is safe for you to have these vulnerable thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a team that can help you sort through that, because I think for every person dealing with betrayal, it does make you question yourself. It does bring that up. That's just sort of part of the process. But being able to sort that through and really look at it and know, actually, I'm not responsible for that. Actually, trusting other people is a healthy behavior, right? I'm not responsible for the fact that my trust was taken advantage of. That's actually on the other person. Being able to sort through that and have people help you sort it through so that you can really reclaim your sense of trust in yourself, I think is a really, really big part of the healing process as well.
And you just said, in the healing process and closer to the end of your book, this chapter really moved me, because this chapter is so good for anyone that is hurting from anything. It could be a relationship at work. It could be a relationship, with a family member. You start to recognize there's negative things that happen in all relationships, but especially in our intimate relationships. And it's braving hope after betrayal. It's the hope, and you noted kind of the 6 phases of healing. And for me, as I was going through them, I loved the first part, because this is where a lot of healing takes place, is in the devastation, is that kind of phase 1, as you recognize it as devastation, that you likely feel it and that it's complex. Can you kind of go through the phases that you see as you start going through the hope that is there to bind us to a different place, that you could actually be better after this experience that is breaking your heart, that you can be stronger, better, wiser, and more beautiful in the relationships you have in the future?
Absolutely. And I do think these 6 phases apply to almost any kind of challenge in many ways. So before I do the phases real quick, let me just talk about braving hope and the idea of braving hope. So we use braving hope as an action. So in our programs, that you are braving hope anytime that you risk trusting again, you risk moving forward in your healing, you risk doing something scary, you risk setting a boundary and it might not go well, you risk making a choice towards something new. That takes enormous bravery and enormous courage and vulnerability. It brings us back to vulnerability again, to brave hope in that way, and hope, in spite of what you've just experienced as betrayal, that something new can happen from it. So we actually use that language as an action. Like, how have you braved hope?
I love it. I think
this is what I ask
fabulous.
my coaching program every month, every night, every Monday night. How have you braved hope? Tell me how you braved hope. Right. So we're looking at that and thinking about that. So that's just an overarching concept and idea. So thinking about the phases, the devastation phase is when your world falls apart because whatever it is has landed in your lap and you've discovered, for my folks that I'm working with, you've discovered the cheating, you've discovered the betrayal. For other people, it's going to be discovery of something else. But whatever has happened, it's happened. And now it has altered your reality profoundly. In a moment, everything has shifted for you. And there's enormous devastation in trying to figure out, how has my reality shifted? What does this mean for me? I feel fear. I feel panic. I feel anxiety. I feel uncertainty. We don't like uncertainty as humans. We don't do well with it. So all of that is the devastation phase. The devastation phase is basically when your normal gets blown away and you're in a new normal and you're floundering around trying to find your way. So that's the first phase. The second phase is the realization phase. And in the realization phase, you start to get sort of the boundaries of this new land you're in. You start to figure out, okay, this is what's happened. I'm starting to get some sense of what this might mean for me, what may have to change, what is going away, what may have to be built back or built anew. I'm starting to understand more, like I understand more about betrayal. I've been reading, etc. I understand more about a diagnosis I've been given, or, whatever it might be. You're starting to really get your head around what's happened and recognize and realize, okay, this is what's going on for me. So that's the second phase of the process. The third phase is stabilization. And I think this is the longest phase in many ways, because this is the phase where you do the work. You do the healing work of, okay, now that this has happened, now that I understand my new reality, what are the skills and tools and resources that I need to bring in to really help me go through this and come out the other side in a different way? So I might need to learn how to set a boundary. Maybe I don't know how to do that. I might need to learn how to use my voice effectively. I might need to learn how to deal with anger in a way that's really good for me. I might need to learn how to build new relationships. I might need to learn how to pick new partners. I don't know, it can be all kinds of different things, but this is the phase where you're learning the new things that you need to learn from the experience that's come in to grow through it and to heal. So that's the stabilization phase. The next phase is the reimagining phase. And this is where you start to imagine life on the other side of whatever has happened. You start to think, okay, I am going to come out the other side of this, right? There is going to be life after this. The sun is going to shine again. And reimagining is where you start to have a vision for what your life might look like as you are growing into this new version of you. Often all the skills and tools that you're learning, you're creating a new relationship with yourself and with others. And you're really growing into more of your authentic self. So now the question is, what do you want that to look like? Right. And you start to get a vision for the life that's ahead of you and that's coming. So those are the first 4 phases. You want me to do the next 2
Please
as well?
do. Absolutely.
Okay. So the next 2 are creating. And the creating phase is where you take this reimagining that you've been doing about the life and you actually start to build that. So you actually start to say, okay, if I've stayed in my relationship with this person that betrayed me, and they also have been willing to go on a growth journey. And now we're looking at each other and saying, what is the life we're going to create together? What's the relationship we're going to create together? What's the emotional relationship, the physical relationship, the financial relationship, the future, our kids, our parenting, all the things? How are we going to create it? And in this phase, you're creating it. You're actively building and creating the new life that you want and really thinking about it with whatever the crisis is. It's now sort of behind you, but it has changed you. And it's changed the future that you're building and that you're creating together. And then the last phase is flourishing. And I always think of flourishing as you know, it's not a destination, it's part of the process. But I think it's the part of the process where you now have a new normal that you're living in. So you've grown into this new place and it's become your new normal. And you have rituals and practices that you do that sustain this new normal that are just part of your life. They're just part of how you live now, how you do your relationship, how you foster relationship with others and with yourself. So that is the flourishing phase. So those are the 6 phases. And the last thing I would say about them is that they're not linear.
I was just going to ask you.
So they're not linear. Yeah.
Can you, because as a girlfriend to a girlfriend, and having watched one of my girlfriends go through this painful experience, I wish I had known all of these 6 phases, because I would have been able to watch, the ping pong back and forth, and then being able to be supportive. I think we all need to know these phases so that we can kind of see where the journey is taking that person.
Mm-hmm.
And Michelle, you did such a beautiful job of kind of laying the foundational growth. And just like our emotions, it ping pongs. It's not one thing. It's not we're going this way. It's these phases do probably have, you think all of a sudden you're starting to have more stability in your life, and then things start to crumble a little bit, and you think, oh, I'm never going to get over this, right? Mm-hmm. I heard that probably 1,000. I will never get through this. And then, here it is 10 years later, happily married and joyous and flourishing. Mm-hmm. So for those of you that are going to help people out there, whether mm-hmm. you're a girlfriend or a support system or someone that these phases are critical. Michelle, what would you tell someone who is trying to help someone and they've opened their door, they're the support system, and they're worried?
I would say if you are trying to support somebody who has been dealing with this, to be aware that they are going to ping pong back and forth, not just through the phases, but through all the different emotions. And it is going to take longer than you think it is. Usually from outside, we can look at it and be like, I'll give you a great example. When I was going through my own journey, one of my really good friends was like, couldn't you have done that faster? And I was like, not really. Well, fast forward 10 years, she went through her own situation, and she came to me and she was like, I get it. Like, it is not fast. It is not quick. So I think from outside, we can think it should be going quicker than it is, but it takes real time. So I think holding a big container for the person you're supporting and giving them room to sort it out for themselves. Because one of the things that people run into is other people's opinions and judgments of what they think is best for them. And often what they really need are people who can just be present, be with them, and say, I'm here for you while you figure out what's best for you.
I love that.
I know you'll be able to do that.
Just you're right, holding that space. It doesn't do the person probably any better if you become negative and you say, well, I hated that person anyway. They were just blah, 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 blah. It might be cathartic for you, but you need another support system for that.
Yeah, you got to go elsewhere.
Yeah. You need to go get your bucket filled over on the right and not in the middle.
Yeah.
Supporting and really just opening your ears and saying, I really, truly love you. I want you to have an experience that is allowing you to flourish. You will get there. And there'll be times where I'm just going to hold space for you to be okay, to be angry, to be resentful, to be vengeful. I mean, I can't tell you the number of stories I've heard just being as a chiropractor with my hands on patients.
Oh, I am sure. It's a little bit like being the hairstylist, right? You get to hear it all.
You do laugh through it and say, well, you might feel that way, but we're probably not going to act that way.
Right.
Right. Michelle, this is really important because it comes down to 3 things that, from a physical healthcare profession that chiropractic is, to a mental healthcare profession that counseling really does embody, and the embraced combined efforts that both of us have, is that there's 3 things that I like to say overlap. One is stability, mobility, and flexibility.
Mm.
And they're found in your profession very beautifully. And stability is the opening of that conversation, the ability to have a stable environment for you to let your emotions down. The second part is flexibility, being able to be, this isn't the life that you chose, but this is the life that you're in.
Mhm.
And having the flexibility to make those choices. And you said it so beautifully at the beginning, is the decisions that you make and the choices that you make after this has been done is what's going to define you for the future and how you're going to grow. And mobility. What do I mean by that? For chiropractors, it's physical. It's being able to move through the pain that maybe you're never exactly the same. I've treated many
Yeah.
veterans who have had very serious injuries, and we had to come to an agreement that if we got to hear this is good, and if we got to hear this is great, but we may never be at that level, and we need to embrace where we're at. And
Mm.
each
Yeah.
step is a movement in there. So for you, in the role of personal relationships, how do you see the overlap on flexibility, mobility, and stability in what a chiropractor would do to where you do on a daily basis?
Gosh, I think they are so similar. I mean, you just said that so beautifully. And, I see stability as being resourced in a way that allows you to think well, use what you have inside you. You need some stability to be able to do that. And so think of stability as emotional and mental and physical stability, and that's both the body, right, and the mind. I think flexibility is way undervalued or under discussed, right? And so the way you spoke about it, but then also mentally and emotionally, the more rigidity we have, the more we're going to suffer.
Well
Because the
said.
more rigidity we have, the more we can't open up to new possibilities that may come from things that we don't want. And life is always bringing us stuff we don't want, whether it's like, somebody cutting us off in traffic to something huge. And the more flexible we are, the more we're able to consider other routes and possibilities of reaching what we want. So I think it's hugely important. And then mobility is the ability to take action. I think of mobility as I can make choice. I can affect change. I can take action in my life. I'm not frozen. I think the opposite of mobility is being frozen, whether that's like a frozen shoulder or emotionally frozen, right? And the ability to instead move it and create change and make movement and forward progress on things.
It's beautifully said. And I think as we go through, and those that would like to have a resource book in their library, I recommend that Michelle has put her time, talent, and experiences, and to me that means so very much, into building the Betrayal Bind. How to heal when the person you love the most hurts you the worst. And as you heard it in Adjusted Reality, we did adjust the reality of just that book. Is that chapter 19 for me could go anywhere at any time. Maybe there's difficult relationships that you're having at work. I think, Michelle, you've done such a masterful job of putting action in the book, actionable items. And I love that you made a verb out of, the hope piece of being brave and starting again. So I want to thank you sincerely. And before we leave, there was one thing after going through what you've been that created an awareness for the future that you could share from experiences from either patients in your office or even your own. What would that one opportunity of wisdom or a nugget of information be that you could share with our listeners today?
I think the biggest thing that I would say is that there's more healing available than we really understand. And there's more healing available to us, and it is possible to heal and flourish after circumstances that feel like they have wiped us completely out. And yet I have seen people come back from things that are incredible, and not just come back from them, but flourish afterward. So I think that would be my nugget, is just that there's way more healing available than we think. And if we can let our imaginations tap into that, it really serves us well.
I love it, Michelle, because it not only comes from the deepest part of what your heart has to cling to is the hope, but it's for the people that are in the support that want to see you flourish again. And the support is incredibly important. And so I want to reflect on both, if you're healing or if you're supporting someone that is healing, perhaps just opening the betrayal bind might be exactly what you need to formulate how to approach, how to build, and obviously how to flourish. Well, thank you, Michelle, so much for your time today. It was wonderful to spend with, and I know our audience has adjusted their reality today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be here.
Thank you for tuning in to Adjusted Reality as we spoke to the author of The Betrayal Bind, Michelle Mays. The ways in which we can grow in our relationships, whether you've had a personal trauma or perhaps betrayal, or you are supporting someone who has gone through a relationship trauma. Our lives improve as we begin to find balance and support, creating stability, flexibility, and mobility to flourish. That's not just for the body, it is for the mind as well. This podcast was brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress. And as a special gift for listening today, visit f4cp.org/health to get a copy of our Mind, Body, Spirit ebook, which focuses on many ways to optimize your health and the ones you love without the use of drugs or surgery. Do not forget to subscribe, share the podcast with family and friends. Feel free to rate and review. We absolutely adore you as a listener, and we want you to get the very best out of life. Flourish. That is what it is all about. I look forward to having you join me again on another episode of Adjusted Reality.